Imagine the door opens and the vault is empty. No gold, no relic, no secret map, only cold stone, a faded red cross, and one question that has followed the Knights Templar ever since their fall. If one of medieval Europe's richest orders was destroyed, where did its treasure go? When the Knights Templar were crushed, Europe expected scandal, confession, and punishment. But behind the accusations of heresy, another mystery refused to disappear. If this was only a religious trial, why does the story keep leading back to money, land, documents, debts, and political leverage? The Templars were not just warriors in white mantles. They were part of a vast medieval network tied to crusading, property, transport, credit, kings, popes, and war. That made them useful. It also made them dangerous. This is not a story where we can honestly claim that one secret chamber explains everything. The evidence is incomplete, and the legends are often louder than the records, so the line has to stay clear. Some things are documented, some are disputed, some are theories, some belong to later myth, but the mystery remains powerful for a reason. If the Templars possessed so much wealth, why was there no clear public treasure haul? Was the fortune stolen, transferred, absorbed, exaggerated, or misunderstood from the beginning? By the end, the missing treasure may look less like buried gold and more like a transfer of power hiding in plain sight. To understand the mystery, we first have to strip away the image that later legend built around the order. The Knights Templar were not simply men guarding a secret vault. They were a medieval military religious order shaped by crusading warfare, monastic discipline, and the practical needs of moving people, supplies, and money through a dangerous world. Their wealth did not come from one hidden chamber, it came from a network. Nobles and rulers gave the order land, houses, rights, and income, often as acts of devotion or as support for wars in the East. Over time, those gifts became estates, farms, mills, fortifications, and commanderies spread across different kingdoms. In some places, the Templars were warriors; in others, they were landlords, managers, transporters, and guardians of valuables. Their houses could serve as trusted places for storing wealth or arranging the movement of funds. Some historians describe parts of this activity as banking like, or as a kind of treasury service, though it should not be confused with modern banking. That is where the treasure story becomes more complicated. A chest of gold is easy to imagine. Institutional wealth is harder to picture, but it may have mattered far more. The Templars had property, they had privileges, they had trusted roots, they had fortified houses and international connections. They could receive wealth in one place and help make it available somewhere else. That trust made the order valuable. It also made it vulnerable. A king might welcome the Templars when he needed soldiers, credit, or secure handling of funds, but the same order could become threatening when royal power tightened, when wars became expensive, when a ruler wanted fewer independent institutions standing between the crown and its money. The Templars answered to religious authority and operated across borders. Their strength was that they were not merely local. Their danger, to ambitious rulers, may have been exactly the same thing. This does not prove that the order was destroyed only for money. The accusations of heresy cannot be treated as if they meant nothing in the medieval world. Religious charges carried real force, and the trial records, however disputed, became part of the official machinery that ended the order. But the money trail keeps pulling the story into darker territory. If the charges were true, then the wealth was a secondary prize. If the charges were exaggerated, coerced, or politically useful, then the fortune becomes part of a much larger operation. So the question is not whether the Templars had wealth to lose. They clearly did, in visible and administrative forms. The question is what kind of wealth people expected to find, and what kind actually survived on paper, in property, in the hands of others. Then came the turning point. The French monarchy moved against the Knights Templar with astonishing force. An order once wrapped in the language of crusade, sacrifice, and papal protection was suddenly described as something far darker. Its members were accused of grave religious crimes, including heresy-related allegations that struck at the heart of medieval Christian identity. To understand why this was so shocking, We have to remember what the Templars were supposed to represent. They were not an obscure fringe group operating at the edge of society. They were publicly connected to the defense of Christian interests in the Holy Land and supported for generations by donations, privileges, and trust. Their white mantles and red crosses had become symbols of disciplined service. Their houses stood across Europe. Their reputation had been built not only on mystery, but on official recognition. So when the accusations came, they did more than threaten individual knights. They threatened the entire image of the order. The charges suggested that behind the public face of devotion, there may have been corrupted rituals, false worship, or acts of denial during initiation. These were the kinds of accusations that could destroy a medieval institution completely, because they did not merely claim bad behavior, they claimed spiritual betrayal. But here the story becomes difficult. There were accusations, there were confessions, there were legal proceedings. Those facts matter, but many confessions were produced under coercive conditions, and the use of torture or the threat of torture has long made their reliability disputed. In that world, a confession did not always mean what a modern viewer might assume. It could be evidence. It could also be the product of fear, pressure, exhaustion, or the need to survive. That does not prove the Templars were innocent of every charge. It also does not prove the charges were true. The safest answer is more unsettling than either extreme. The record shows a powerful order placed under extraordinary pressure, accused in ways that fit the most serious religious fears of the age, judged through procedures that still leave historians arguing about what can truly be trusted, and this uncertainty changes the treasure question. If the accusations were substantially true, then the mystery of gold and property becomes secondary to a religious scandal. The destruction of the order would appear, at least in part, as a reaction to internal corruption. But if the accusations were exaggerated, shaped, or manipulated, then the missing fortune becomes something very different. It becomes part of a possible political operation where destroying the reputation of the Templars helped make it possible to break their power, seize their houses, freeze their resources, and redirect their wealth. This is why the fall of the Templars still feels unresolved. The case was never just about belief. It was also about land, debt, authority, and who had the power to decide what counted as truth. So who was standing closest when that ownership was broken apart? After the order was suppressed, the official story of its property did not point toward a secret cavern or a vanished royal hoard. In broad terms, many Templar assets were intended to pass to another military religious order, the Knights Hospitaller. That matters because it gives us a documented path for a large part of the fortune. Not a perfect path, not a clean path everywhere, but a path. This is where the treasure mystery becomes less like an adventure tale and more like a legal battlefield. The Templars had not simply owned gold, they had owned land, houses, farms, mills, fortified sites, rents, rights, debts, and claims. They had local commanderies that managed estates and income. They had properties spread across different kingdoms, each with its own rulers, officials, rival interests, and legal habits. When the order collapsed, all of that did not vanish in one dramatic night. Much of it became paperwork. That may sound less cinematic than a chest of coins, but in medieval Europe, paperwork could be power. A seal on a document could decide who collected rent. A transfer order could determine who controlled a farm road, a chapel, a warehouse, or a fortified compound. A dispute over a deed could tie up property for years. A monarch, a noble, a bishop, or a local officer could all have reasons to delay, redirect, hold on to what had once belonged to the Templars. So when people ask where the treasure went, one cautious answer is this: some of it may never have been missing. It may have been absorbed into new hands through official transfer, local seizure, negotiation, and dispute. In some places, hospitaller control may have been the intended outcome. In others, the reality could be slower and messier, especially where political authorities had already taken possession or where local claims stood in the way. This distinction is crucial. Portable treasure can disappear into a chest, onto a cart, or aboard a ship. Institutional wealth leaves heavier tracks. Land cannot be hidden under a cloak. A mill still turns beside the water. A house still stands in a town. A field still produces income for someone. What changes is the name on the claim, the seal on the order, and the hand collecting the revenue. That is why the legend of the lost Templar fortune can be misleading if we imagine only gold. The order's real wealth was not only movable riches, it was a network of assets that had to be reassigned, contested, recorded, or quietly taken. A vanished mountain of treasure is hard to prove. A transfer of power can hide in plain sight, spread across parchment, property lines, and administrative decisions. But official transfers do not explain everything. If there were movable valuables, documents, or emergency funds, those could have moved before the noose tightened, and this is where the ground becomes uncertain. One theory claims that some movable wealth may have been moved before the order was fully trapped. If members of the order heard warnings or understood that political pressure was closing in, they may have tried to protect funds, records, or valuables. That is possible in a general sense. Powerful organizations often have stores, trusted couriers, and private channels of communication. But possibility is not proof. Without clear inventories showing what was missing, the image of wagons of treasure slipping away remains a theory, not a conclusion. Another theory is less romantic, but perhaps more historically plausible. Some wealth may have been absorbed by rulers and local powers during the confusion. When an institution is suddenly accused, seized, and dismantled, the official destination of its property is only one part of the story. Claims can be delayed. Buildings can be occupied. Income can be diverted. Legal ownership can say one thing while practical control says another. In that version of the mystery, the treasure did not disappear into a cave or a coded map. It dissolved into courts, debts, expenses, and local hands. There is also a third possibility, and it is the one legend least wants to accept. The famous hoard may never have existed in the form later stories imagined. The Templars were wealthy, but medieval wealth was often not a mountain of gold. It was income from land. It was rights, rents, safe houses, warehouses, ships, horses, fortifications, and trusted relationships. A modern viewer may imagine an underground vault filled with coins. A medieval administrator may have seen a stack of claims, charters, ledgers, and privileges. Still, the legend grew. Later stories would imagine secret fleets leaving under cover of fog, sealed chests carried through hidden routes, sacred objects concealed from enemies, coded instructions passed down through generations. These images are powerful because they turn a complicated legal and political collapse into something the eye can follow. A red cross fading on a wall, an empty vault, a ship disappearing into gray water, a ledger with pages torn out. But the evidence demands caution. Hidden gold, secret relics, coded maps, and escape routes belong in the realm of legend unless stronger proof appears. They may reveal how later generations wanted to understand the Templars more than they reveal what actually happened when the order fell. The story becomes a mirror. To some, the Templars are innocent guardians of forbidden knowledge. To others, they are victims of royal greed. To others, they are a powerful religious institution brought down by accusations that may have mixed belief, fear, politics, and opportunity. The grounded alternative is quieter, but more dangerous. What if the real Templar treasure was the network itself? Not simply coins, but credit. Not only castles, but routes. Not only weapons, but experience moving men, money, and messages across borders. Not only land, but the paperwork that proved who owed what, who had granted which privilege, and who could claim protection from whom. If that was the treasure, then the fall of the order looks different. The trial was not only a search for heresy, it may also be understood as the destruction of a system of power, followed by a struggle over its remains. The accusations mattered in the medieval world, and they cannot be dismissed as decoration. But the debts, the property, and the political pressure make the story feel larger than doctrine alone. So the empty vault is not the end of the mystery. It is the beginning of a harder question. The most dangerous treasure may not have glittered. It may have been information. Debts, contacts, privileges, and records powerful people wanted controlled. So where did the Templar treasure go? The most careful answer is also the least cinematic at first glance. Much of it may not have vanished into tunnels, ships, or hidden chambers at all. The best supported explanation is that a large part of Templar wealth existed as institutional power. Estates, rights, buildings, rents, debts, stored goods, local privileges, and legal claims. When the order was destroyed, those things did not disappear in a single night. They were pulled into courts, royal treasuries, church decisions, local disputes, and transfers to other hands. Some property was meant to pass through official religious channels. Some was delayed, contested, or absorbed by people close enough to seize opportunity. But that is very different from proving that a legendary mountain of gold was discovered, stolen, or secretly carried away. That part remains unproven, and this is where the mystery changes shape. The absence of a famous treasure haul does not make the fall of the Templars less suspicious. In some ways, it makes it more political. A chest of coins can be counted. A network is harder to see. Land can be renamed. Documents can be sealed. Debts can be forgiven, disputed, or redirected. A military order that once moved money, men, letters, supplies, and influence across borders could be worth more. A broken system than as a buried fortune. This does not mean the Templars were simply innocent victims of a plot. The accusations against them belonged to a medieval religious world where heresy was treated as a deadly serious threat. Some members confessed, others denied the charges. Many of those confessions remain difficult to judge because coercion and pressure were part of the legal environment surrounding the trials. So the honest conclusion is not a clean verdict, it is a tension. The Templars may have faced genuine religious suspicion, but the process that destroyed them also carries the marks of power politics, financial pressure, and an extraordinary chance to redirect wealth. That is why the phrase political show trial still follows the story. Not because every charge can be dismissed with certainty, and not because every accusation was invented from nothing, but because accusation, debt, royal power, and asset seizure came together in a way that still demands caution. The lost treasure, then, may be partly real and partly illusion. Real, if we mean the enormous value locked inside property, credit, archives, commanderies, and influence. Illusion, if we mean a proven secret vault waiting somewhere beneath stone, filled with relics and gold. Legend remembers the vault because it is simple. History points us toward paperwork because that is where power often hides. In the final image, the red cross does not need to fade into darkness. It can fade from a shield to a seal pressed into wax, from a warrior's mantle to a document on a table, because empires do not only bury secrets under floors, sometimes they file them, transfer them, and let the legend distract everyone from the signatures. And in the next case, we will follow another trail where belief, war, and money collide. But for the Templars, the question remains, when a powerful order is destroyed, should we look for the treasure under the floor or in the hands of whoever writes the final document?